That was amazing, as always. Thank you. Well, good morning.
Good morning.
Welcome to the Alaska Center for Spiritual Living. Thank you for coming out today. It's good to see everybody here, braving the single-digit temperatures this morning. And thank you for watching. Those of you watching on YouTube, it's always good to connect via our technology as well. I like to start the service with a story sometimes. And this story is from the Hebrew Scriptures, and following in the tradition of many of the storytellers of that era, 2,000, 2,500 years ago or more, they very often prefaced their story with a statement, something to the effect that said, I don't know whether it really happened this way or not. But that's unimportant. What's important is the story. And today's story is about Abraham. Now, Abraham lived a long, long life, and there were a lot of stories with Abraham. But today's story comes from a time late in Abraham's life. He was married to Sarah, and she was barren. They never had any kids. And God sensed that Abraham was sad because of not being able to have a son. And so God came to Abraham and he told him, you've been a good man, you've done what I've asked of you, and you will be rewarded. You will have a son. Well, that really cheered old Abraham up. He was excited about that. So he beat feet home and he told Sarah, he says, God told me that we're going to have a son. And she said, oh, that's wonderful. Well, nothing happened the next month or the next or the next. And the years started to add up and still no son. So finally one day Sarah said to Abraham, she said, Abraham, we're not getting any younger. You're in your upper 70s and I'm right behind you. And things aren't looking real good for this. So she said, but I've got this handmaiden, this slave that we got from Egypt. I've got this handmaiden, Hagar. Why don't you go sleep with Hagar and see if you can have a son with her? Well, Abraham, I don't know. And she says, yeah, go ahead. So he does. And sure enough, Hagar has a son. And the son, they named him Ishmael. Well, they had forgotten that God had given them a promise and that she was going to conceive and she was going to have a son. And then sure enough, she's in her 90s by now and boom, Sarah's pregnant. I said, I don't know whether it really happened this way or not. But the important part is the story. So they have a son together. And they name him Isaac. And that was what God had foretold, that you will have a son and you will name him Isaac. So they named this little boy Isaac. Well, everything was okay at first, but then one day as little Isaac grew, and of course Ishmael was a little bit bigger, Ishmael was picking on Isaac and kind of making fun of him. Well, that didn't go over real good with Sarah. So she went to Abraham and she said, hey, I want you to throw out that Hagar and that damn little Ishmael. I want you to get him out of here. Well, he says, I can't do that. He's my son. No, I said, wait, he says, besides, they need to leave. It's either me or them. I said, oh, what am I going to do? He said, it was your idea in the beginning. She says, I don't care. You should have known that this wasn't going to turn out good. So he didn't know what to do. So he went to God and he said, what am I going to do? I got two women. Both of them are mad at me. This has no good outcome. What am I supposed to do, God? So God thought about it and he said, okay, I want you to tell Hagar and Ishmael that they have to leave. They've got to go. But I'm going to take care of them. Don't worry. I'm going to take care of them. So he says, okay. So he went back, and the next morning he went to Hagar and Ishmael, and he says, I talked to God, and he says, you got to go. And they said, okay, I guess so. She wasn't real happy about it, but he gave her some water and, I don't know, made her a sandwich or something and sent them on their way. And then that made Sarah happy, and everything's going along okay for a while. So, like I say, the important thing is a story. What is this story telling us? What can we learn from this story? This story is telling us that as long as we step into the divine flow, as long as we allow God, Spirit, the thing itself, whatever name you choose to assign to your higher power, whatever it is, as long as we allow that force, that power into our lives, things can work along pretty good. It's only when we have to step in and think that we have to control it, we have to do it, that we start muddying up the water. Pretty good story. And it's got a good lesson. Abraham and Sarah lacked the faith to stick with what God had promised them. This kind of reminds me of another story. I'm kind of on a tangent here. So, there was this guy, and he was down in Homer, walking on Captain's Beach one day. And he looked down, there was kind of a little shiny thing. He didn't know what it was. He bent down, he picked it up, kind of brushed off the sand and the dust and whatnot. As he's doing that, and he realizes it's an old oil lamp. And as he's brushing it off, poof, out comes this big genie. And as genie says, you have released me from my prison inside this lamp. I will grant you any wish you want. And the guy says, oh, tell you what, there is something. He says, I have always wanted to go to Hawaii, but I am terrified of flying in a plane. No way am I ever going to get in an airplane. He says, and it just takes too long. I'd have to drive all the way around through Canada, down through the U.S. to get to San Francisco to get on a boat. And it takes weeks to get there on a boat. There's no way I can do it. So what my wish is, I wish that you would build me a bridge right here from Captain's Beach all the way to Hawaii. And the genie went, oh, man. He said, I guess I could do that, but there's an awful lot involved with that. He said, the depths of the ocean and the storms that come in and the ice that had built up and the engineering alone behind that would just be staggering. And then we'd have to allow for shipping lanes to go underneath it. This is really a big request. He says, could you ask for something else? So he thought for a minute and he says, well, Genie, tell you what, I've been married 4 times. And he says, I have really tried to be a good husband, but it just didn't seem to work out. Could you explain to me how a woman thinks? Could you teach me how to think like a woman? Genie got really perplexed and he looked down for a minute and he says, did you want that bridge to be 4 lanes or 6 lanes? Yeah. Well, the title of my talk today is One with the Infinite. The theme for the month of February has been our oneness. And we've talked an awful lot about our oneness with one another. And it's an area that I'm really comfortable with because I really believe deep down in the bottom of my soul that once we scrape off all the overburden, we take off, the things that classify us, the gender, our age, our, all of the things that classify, our skin color, and, where we come from. We get rid of all that, throw all that out. We are really basically one people. We are all part of the human race, and we are one. Now, to take that a step further and recognize that we are one with God, that's a little bit more difficult. This was a quote that we had a couple of weeks ago, and I love it. God is love. There can be no doubt about that. Love can be as established as a scientific principle that belongs to every man. We shall never come into an understanding of love until we come into an understanding of humanity. And we shall never come into an understanding of humanity or unity as long as we think that one man is more important than another. God's nature is love. We shall never approach love other than by loving and by being lovable. There is no other way. Ernest Holmes is a genius. Earlier this week, I was trying to come up with some things for the talk today and whatnot. And a few weeks ago, I think, we participated in that interfaith council thing, and we went to a bunch of different churches, different spiritual centers and whatnot. And I ended up sitting next to a Mormon lady through 2 of the 4 of them. And she came walking in the door. It really surprised me. And she has this thing, and it's called the Alaska Women of Faith. And it's all different faith traditions. It's a day for the girls.
Wow.
Days for Girls is a nonprofit organization helping girls stay in school and retain their dignity. Most girls in developing countries miss school during their periods. Many eventually drop out. They can't attend school during their period, so they have to leave because they don't have any feminine protection. They don't have any sanitary protection. And we can do something about that. Now, some people well, Reverend Don, you turned me down for this request and that request, and yet you jump up and you're all behind now trying to help these girls in developing countries. And I want to explain this. We have a mission. And we all got together, and boy, we put dots on the wall, and we wrestled and everything else, cage death matches, to come up with what our mission statement is and everything else. And we came up, our mission statement is we teach spiritual transformation with grace and joy. I even ended up with 2 dogs, Grace and Joy. That doesn't mean we don't do other things. But it means our focus is that. I have people come and say, why aren't we doing more for the food bank? Why aren't we doing more for this cause or that cause? Those aren't our mission. It doesn't mean we don't support them. There are people whose mission it is to feed the hungry. And we support those people to feed the hungry. But it's not our mission. Our mission is teaching spiritual transformation. So I'm not saying that our mission should be to help girls in developing countries, but I am saying that it's something that we can support. So I'm going to put this out next Saturday. There's a thing, and I don't know, I've got the details, but a group of women of faith get together at Elizabeth Ann Seton Church Saturday, March 2nd, 9 to 3:30, and they're sewing kits for distribution to girls in developing countries so that they don't have to leave school. So I'm going to put this poster up, and I've got some more information. If anyone wants to do that, I would certainly support you in that. Thank you, Christine. It's just like our song. Do all you can with what you have. And it doesn't have to be much, but it can sure help. So today, that is our oneness with one another, our oneness with people in developing countries, our oneness with each other within this room, within this community of Anchorage, within the state of Alaska, our nation and the world. But there's something greater than that is our oneness with the divine. So today I'm going to talk about get in the flow. We've all tried to do things on our own, and we are one with God. So my first thing is get in the divine flow. Life is messy. Everybody, life is messy. Sometimes we see the big fancy house on the hillside that's all, fancy, everything's great and everything. And we think, boy, the people in there must really be happy. They've got 4 cars and 6 snow machines and remote property. Boy, you know what? Life is messy. And everybody's life is messy. Everybody has challenges in their life. And it's not about living a life that's not messy. It's about living a life that can react to being messy. It's living a life that can allow you to move through the mess. And when we can recognize and embrace our oneness with that power, whatever you choose to call it, your higher power, you can deal with the messiness of life a lot better. My last years of my previous working career really took a downturn. I got a new boss, and he didn't like older workers. That was it. And there were 10 of us, branch managers, and he very selectively got every one of us, fired every one of us, and replaced us with guys less than half our age, time after time after time. And I was the last one that he got. And he eventually got me. And I had to take a demotion. And boy, I was hot under the collar. I was ready to sue, he's ageist, and he was. That's true. Fortunately, I was married to a practitioner. And she said, now, Don, think that through. I've grown accustomed to this occurrence every 2 weeks, and there seems to be a deposit in our bank account. Maybe you want to think that through before you... Oh, yeah. But she says, you can just go with the flow. Maybe this is going to be a gift to you. And it really turned out to be that. I didn't have to worry about 14 people. I didn't have to worry about who's, and all of the other things that went with it, and who's not showing up today, and who's going to cover what, and how are we going to get that done. I didn't have to worry about performance appraisals and all that. If I tell her she's no good, I didn't have to do any of that any longer. And it put me into a thing where all I had to do was sell. And I always liked that anyway. It put me into a place that really did it. And there were some really hidden gifts in there. And we don't have enough time to tell all the story today, but I came away with two really important things. One of them was realization that I am not who my title is. I realized that I had been identified with being the manager for GE in Alaska for so long. And that's not the truth of who I am. But even more importantly, I think what I learned was that in sales, if you're only going for the sale, it's going to be a tough putt. But if you can just get in and really listen to the customer, forget that you're trying to sell something, forget you even have any products, just listen to the customer and find out what it is they really need. What are their needs? Let them tell you, and find out if maybe you've got something in this basket of stuff that you represent that you could sell them. If you don't, that's okay too. There's a lot of customers out there. And what a powerful recognition that was. And when you can come out and you can say, oh, I can help with that. Maybe it's a tiny order, but it can turn into a really big one. And it happened for me over and over and over. And then it was kind of funny. Then I even lost that job, the sales job. So they took away my good accounts, and they gave me a bunch of really small accounts. And yet, that divine current, no matter where I went, accounts we'd never done business with, all of a sudden had to have some GE stuff. It just happened over and over. So get into the divine flow. Listen to your practitioner. Number two, we've all tried to direct things on our own. And this has been an interesting week. It seems to me that I get contacts from people in bunches. Well, the bunch this week was employment. I had 3 different individuals came to me this week with employment concerns. One, looking for a job. Another one has a job, but they don't like what it is. And as I think about those things, I started thinking, what do you really like to do? What is it that inspires you? What is it that in your life just makes it so you can't hardly wait to get out of bed in the morning and have your feet hit the floor because you just want to get running? When you step into those things, then you're moving close to that. And what occurs to me is that we all have unique talents and gifts. Every one of us have unique gifts. No two are the same. Fingerprints and snowflakes, no two are the same. And yet each one of those unique talents and gifts that each of us have a niche in this world that is needed. You are needed in this world right now. I absolutely guarantee that. You are needed in this world. All we have to do is find out and meet that need. And when we get to the place where we can use those unique talents and gifts, then we are happy because we're doing what we like. We're successful because we're naturally good at it. And we're prosperous because the universe will prosper us. Another story that I thought of, guy dies and goes to heaven, and St. Peter's showing him, around up there, and came into this hallway in there, just rows and rows and rows of clocks on the wall. I mean, thousands and thousands of clocks, and they're all ticking at a different rate. And he says, what's with all the clocks? He says, oh, everybody on earth has a clock in heaven. Really? Well, how's come they're all going at different speeds? Well, see, if you sin, then it is a click. And he says, oh. He says, well, whose clock is that over there? I mean, it's hardly moving at all. Oh, he says, that's Billy Graham. Oh, my. He said, well, look at that clock. It's got dust on it. It hasn't moved in a long time. Who's that? He says, oh, that's Mother Teresa. Oh, wow. He says, can I see my clock? Where's my clock? He goes, oh, yeah. Come on into the office. We're using it as a fan. See, we all make mistakes. Life is messy.
That's good.
Third point, we are one with God. That divine presence is here to guide us, and it is always here for us. And this is, I think, one of the most brilliant things Ernest Holmes ever wrote. The indwelling God is the greatest single factor in our whole lives. It means that there is nothing between us and God. There is no intermediary. There is no place to go to find God. God already exists in the midst of us. And we would try to seek him elsewhere. It would be like God trying to hunt for himself. God is not lost, and neither are we lost or separated from God. The more completely we are able to see God in everything, the more completely will the one God in all things respond to us. And it is when we can recognize that God presence within ourselves that allows us to step into the flow, allows us to make that crooked road straight, to allow the wind to blow gently at our backs. Final story, I'll go back to the Hebrew Scriptures. A young guy by the name of Joseph. He had a whole bunch of brothers, and Joseph was the youngest one, and he was Dad's favorite. He was a later in life addition to the family, and obviously he was the favorite of Dad. Dad was always doing things for him, and the older brothers, they didn't like that, and they resented Joseph. And so they captured Joseph, and they hauled him away, and they were going to kill him. They threw him down in this pit, and he was going to die. And then this tribe came by, and powerful desert tribe came by, a pretty good-sized group, and one of the brothers says, hey, instead of just throwing him in this pit to die, why don't we sell him to these guys that are coming by? And we can get some money that way. And the brothers think, well, that's not a bad idea. So they hailed down this tribe going by, and they said, hey, we got this guy in this pit down here. How would you like to buy him? And they said, well, did you look at his teeth? Look at him on there, Yeah, he looks young and strong. Yeah, okay. So they bought this guy. And the brothers got their money, and off they went. And everything seemed to be okay. But then it's just one of those Paul Harvey things, the rest of the story. You see, this Joseph that was thrown into the pit by his brothers, his father was a guy by the name of Jacob. And his father's father, or his grandfather, was a guy by the name of Isaac. And his great-great-grandfather, the father of Isaac, happened to be none other than Abraham. And so one of the brothers says to him, who were those guys that came by and bought old Joseph out of the pit? I don't know. This band coming by, they said they were the Ishmaelites. And now you know the rest of the story. See, that divine current was working all the way through Abraham and Joseph, because that divine current knew that the day would come that Ishmael would be there to rescue Abraham's descendant. So the conclusion, what I want you to take away today. Number one, that divine current is always conspiring for us. And I would pale if I tried to say anything better than what we did in that second Ernest Holmes quote. The indwelling God, and this is written in the gender specific of the time. This was written in the 50s, 60 years ago, and the terms were different then. It wasn't gender inclusive, so forgive us. The indwelling God is the greatest single factor in our whole lives. Indwelling God. It means that there is nothing between us and God. There is no intermediary. We don't have to have a priest, a minister, or anything else. There is no place to go to find God. God already exists in the midst of us. And if we would try to seek him elsewhere, it would be like God trying to hunt for God. God is not lost, and neither are we lost or separated from God. The more completely we are able to see God in everything, the more completely will the one God in all things respond to us. And so it is with our awareness of the presence of that one God within each and every one of us that I invite my colleagues, the practitioners, to join me in prayer, to join me in simply knowing that that one life, that one power, that presence that is God is expressing itself through and as each and every one of us in this and in every moment. There is no place to go to look for God, because God is right here. It is within each and every one of us. And even though each of us goes through a messy life, and we have challenges, we have opportunities, that divine presence never leaves us. It never says, you should have listened to me. It never says, you were wrong. It only continually supports us. And there is a divine plan that is supporting each and every one of us at every moment. I speak my word for those who are experiencing lack and limitation. They have more month than they have paycheck. They have a job that is unsatisfying and unrewarding. We just simply know that we live in an abundant universe. And as long as we can open ourselves up, that heaven will pour out a blessing unto us greater than we can imagine. That our skills, our talents are already there. And right now, there is someone actively looking for that absolute person that has those skills and talents. I speak my word for those who are experiencing health challenges, the appearance of dis-ease. We just know that within each of us, there is a divine pattern of perfection. There is a blueprint for perfect health. And it is that blueprint that we call forth. Within our bodies, there is healing power for every one of us. Remission of cancer. Every single thing that we can think of in terms of a physical ailment, our bodies have the ability to heal, and it is that healing that we call forth. It is that perfection that we call forth. And lastly, I speak my word for those who are experiencing separation from their fellow man, separation from God, who are feeling that they are distant. We just simply know that each of us are products of God, that each of us are products of that infinite intelligence, that divine creative force. And we scrape away the overburden of gender, of age, of ethnicity, skin color, all of the things that separate us. We are one. And it is that oneness that we embrace. Oneness with one another and oneness with God. And so we just give thanks. We give thanks for our awareness of the power and the presence of God in our lives. We give thanks for health. We give thanks for prosperity. And we give thanks for love. Now I just release these words to a working of law that always responds yes. We let it go, we let it be, and so it is.
So it is.